Hello, and thank you for joining us for our tutorial, where we'll cover developing a live online agenda for the Oregon Registry Training Session Proposal. My name is Kim Larson, and I am excited to spend this time with you, this hopefully brief time with you, in helping you learn a little bit more about our proposals for a live online agenda, where you will feel more confident that in filling out your proposal for a live online agenda, and you'll have minimal feedback and get your session approved quickly. So let's get started. In this session, we're going to look at the training session standards and it's the impacts that happen for a live online delivery, um, to specifically to the agenda, but to a few of the other training session standards. Before we get started, I think it's helpful to just lay the groundwork of what sets are. Sets are levels for Oregon Registry training. So there's the set one, which is your first level. It's foundational. And a set one training, you're going to be, as a trainer, going to be providing content on the what, the how, the why. It's that the trainers understand it. They can learn what it is. They can identify it. They can possibly learn the history of it or theories behind it, or what it is in specific situations, and understand the content itself. Whereas a set two, that next level up is, now that they understand the content, the what, the how, the why, they can now start to apply it for themselves. And in that application, examine what happens when I apply it, what happens in the real world, what happens in a real setting or in specific settings and with specific folks and communities and cultures and settings. So that's step two. Step two is really taking it a step further of, you understand the content, but now you're applying it to the self, to the person, to the community, to the children, to the setting or facility, and examining what happens in application. Whereas that next level up, set three, is the evaluation. So now that you understand the content and the what, the how, the why, you've applied it and are examining what happens when you apply it. You can now start to evaluate it. You can compare and contrast. You can really evaluate its effectiveness when you apply it, or in a certain, with a certain community or culture, or with a specific child or family. You can start to evaluate it and then even maybe synthesize that evaluation to potentially create something that's brand new, that's specific and works best for you or your children or the setting or the families and the communities that you work with, or the program that you are or they are creating. So those are those levels of what they're doing with the content, of understanding it and identifying it versus applying and examining application and then evaluation of it. So regardless of set, you want your training to be engaging. You want your training to engage the participants with you, with other participants, with the content. And when we deliver a training live online, how do we have engagement when that might not seem so easy or be as easy as we are used to with our live or in-person sessions? Our recommendation for from the Oregon Registry Trainer Program is that we don't recommend that you solely use chat, that you're not over reliant on chat, especially in a session that's more than an hour long or that is a set two or set three. There are many applications that you can use and other ways to engage your participants with the activities and the content. So again, we encourage you not to overly rely on chat. So what are the other applications you can use? So we've got two columns here, and it's really, it's about the platform. Your platform is your Zoom, your Adobe, your GoToMeeting or GoToTraining, or the various platforms. It's how you're hosting your training. So we've broken these up into two different columns. One is internal, so it's within your application or your platform. So there are applications that are inside of it. So you don't have to go anywhere. You can launch a poll, you can have people chat, you can share your screen, which is what I'm doing right now. You can annotate or do a whiteboard where they're actually interacting with their screen and pinpointing stuff or writing on tabs or on post-it notes, or making a cute little drawing. There's also breakout rooms where they can go and do pair share or small groups, where there's nonverbal features and reactions or virtual backgrounds. The external is then they are going to be leaving the platform. They're going to be leaving your Zoom or your go-to, and they are going to another program or another online site. And all of these are online sites. And list is not exhaustive. And I would actually say the internal ones, I'm sure as we continue to do more online training, that list will not be, that there'll be more applications as the platforms grow. That list is going to grow. And this external platform applications is definitely, there are so many more that you might be able to utilize. Our caveat with the external is that essentially when you are leaving your platform, you're going someplace else, and you as a trainer should feel pretty technologically savvy that if someone were to get lost, that once they've left your platform and they go someplace else and they don't know how to get back to your platform, that can be, that you want to make sure you feel really confident with your technology, that you can help guide them back. Another thing you might want to think about is how many folks do you have, because if you have a large group, you're going to want to make sure that you'll be able to help all of them if whoever has issues of leaving the platform. But additionally, if you have a lot, you might just want to use one of the external platform, and all you're using your go-to or your Zoom is just for the lecture, and then they're interacting on this other platform or application that's external to the one that you are hosting your training on. So these are, there are a lot of ways to engage your participants. It's just understanding technology and your comfort level with it, as well as the number of people you're working with and their comfort with technology. But there are definitely ways to engage your participants with the content, each other, and you. Some notes that we want to preface before we jump into the agenda is that developing and delivering a training live online takes recalibrating, especially for many of us who are used to delivering our training in person. And it really recalibrates how we approach our training session standards and specifically your agenda. And that there's really no one method for developing or converting your training to live online delivery, but we do know that direct conversion often doesn't work. And I would also say that if you do direct conversion, it impacts many components and it impacts the training session standards. Again, we encourage you not to rely on chat, especially in a set 2 or set 3. And we encourage you really to look at your objectives. Those are your true key to designing and converting a training to deliver it live online. So whatever it is that you're aiming to achieve, that you want your participants to achieve, that is going to guide you in developing and designing or converting your training session to live online delivery. So during our time here in our little brief tutorial, we're going to be looking at 3 main things, or there are these 3 key components that will help you in your development of an agenda for a live online training session. The guidebook, I'm assuming you know that because that's where this video lives. On that guidebook, you can find the training session standards and our outline. The training session standards, we'll look at it just a minute, and your outline is a document that will help you prepare your session before you submit it formally. So on the trainer guidebook, where this video lives, there's the website. Unfortunately, you can't just click on that, but hopefully you have that saved in your list of of bookmarks. That the trainer guidebook, you'll see under the home button or under the home icon, you can see there's a developing a training session. And if you click on that, you're going to find the training session standards and the outline, along with many other resources. Those 2 specifically, though, you'll want to become familiar with, because those will really help you as you develop your proposal and your training session proposal, and just your training in general. The training session, you can see it here. When you go to those those web pages for the training session standards and for the outline, you'll see this the image and the icon. Go ahead and click on that, and that's going to open up in a new tab. And at that point, you want to download it. I will say we do make updates on occasion to the instructions, to our guidance. The training session standards likely won't change, but the guidance may change. And so if we do make updates to our instructions and the guidance, We will inform all of our trainers and all of our SO representatives by email. And at that point, I encourage you to delete any previous training session standards that you have saved and download and save the new one. But again, we will make sure that you all have that information and are given that information. And you will do the same thing with your outline where it'll open up in a new tab and you'll download that for your keeping. So within the standards, you will see one of them is the agenda. And what we ask for in your agenda are a teaching strategy, topic, and brief description. And that helps for each activity that you're doing, and each of those are going to relate to your agenda. So let's spend some time looking at what that means. Your teaching strategy is your method that you use to deliver your course content and materials for your participants to engage with that content and materials. Your topic is the focus of your content and your activity. And a brief description is how your participants will be engaging with that content with you or with each other. So let's look at what an example of that might look like. Excuse me, that was loud. So I'm using an in-person here simply because so many of us are familiar with in-person delivery, and lucky you if you are more familiar and more comfortable with live online, and all we're doing here for you is helping you fill out your agenda and your proposal. But for many of us, in-person is what we are more familiar with, and so I start there. So a teaching strategy, an example of a teaching strategy for in-person is a poster walk, where there's a poster of daily routine activities listed on them, such as entering school and welcome, circle time and snack and lunch and outdoor play, etc. And the topic is inclusion for children with diverse and special needs. And the brief description is participants will go to each poster and they're going to write down strategies for how they'll support the multiple needs and physical abilities for each of those daily routines. So this is just an example. And I'd actually say there's probably more to this activity, like how are they going to debrief that, or what are they gleaning from that? That might be the next line item, or you would just add that to this description. So this is just an example of what that looks like for in-person. So we know that in-person and live online delivery are different. And as we've said, often you can't just directly convert. Well, also for your agenda, it's not just a direct conversion. For your in-person agenda, when you're getting people into groups or walking in around in a room, that's often your teaching strategy, such as a poster walk. Okay, I got it. You're doing posters, they're gonna walk. It's pretty self-explanatory. But for live online, getting your participants into groups, handing out a worksheet, asking them to participate in a group discussion or that poster board brainstorm, those aren't necessarily intuitive. I need a little bit more information from you of how they are going to engage with the technology to be able to do those things. So how do we explain that in our agenda? First, let's look at some online teaching strategies. So that might be a lecture with guided questions, a sharing your screen with PowerPoint presentation, which is what I'm doing now. You can launch a poll, you can initiate breakout groups, you can use annotation or whiteboards, you can chat them a link to an online poster board or a brainstorm dump, or maybe you're going to chat them a link to a worksheet and they're going to do that individually in separate tabs, or maybe they're going to turn off their screen and do that individually on their own computer or on a piece of paper. So those are all different teaching strategies for live online delivery. The topic is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to jump into the description of activities. So when you are describing how you are going to do your activity, the teaching strategy for live online, these are 4 questions you may want to answer. They're not a requirement. You do not need to answer these, but they may help you to describing your activity and your teaching strategy. So those questions are, how will items be shared with participants? What are those items? Like, is it an application, a handout, a link, or document? How will you guide them to use those items? And what are they going to do with it? So you may want to answer those 4 questions in your description of activity. So now let's look at what an agenda example will be for a live online. I'm going to use the exact same example from the in-person to the live online, and you're going to see and I did it on purpose because this is kind of complicated and it helps to discuss how a session is impacted by live online delivery, especially if you're converting from in-person. So our example as a teaching strategy is a poster board brainstorm. And again, it's that same sort of activity where there's routines on the posters. The topic is the same, the inclusion for children with special needs and how we support multiple needs and physical abilities. And the description now starts to include that technology and answer those 4 questions. Participants will be given a link and a chat box for a Google document that has links to another Jamboard poster. They're going to open each in a separate tab and they're going to type in their strategies. So you can see that's pretty complicated, and it impacts the way, because it really shifts what we're doing in that live online. It really impacts what you need to write in your agenda, among other things, and we'll talk about those other things in a minute. But so you're going to really need to make sure you address the agenda, the technology, and how your participants are interacting with that in addition to the content. Another example, and this is just, this may be helpful for folks, but we now put it on a table. And again, it's that the topic, the teaching strategy, and activity description. And we've added here how it ties to your objective. This is not required. You do not need to do this. It just may be helpful to you. And if you include it to us, it's helpful for us. But again, it's not required. So let's take a look. The reflection activity, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's not necessarily tied to one objective, but it's really about the purpose of your reflection activity is it's best practice in adult education. And it's really a time and space to bring in all of the adults in your room, all of their rich experience and history that they have, and bring that into the room so that they can start to think about their own experiences and leveraging that as they start to interact with the content that you're going to be providing. So let's walk through these. The reflection activity that is the topic. Your teaching strategy is an individual work. They're going to do an art project with pens and paper that they have with them, and then they're going to do a large group share. So the activity description is ask participants to draw pictures of places that they like to play as a child, and they're going to be done on a piece of paper. And then you are going to ask 2 or 3 participants to share their image by holding it up on the screen with cameras on, and they're going to describe it to the large group. And again, that's tied to all objectives. The next activity is the topic is research related to arranging environments for diverse needs. The teaching strategy is a PowerPoint presentation, guided reflection, and breakout groups. So your description is you're going to share your screen to display the PowerPoint. There's going to be guided question prompts that ask them to apply that research to their own physical space and their program or facility. And then they're going to be sent to breakout groups where they're going to discuss their reflections. And that's tied to your objective. Participants will apply research in their own programs and spaces. So this one, I just want to note that specifically this activity is very much a set 2 activity. And the reason is that they are applying the research to their own physical space and their program or facility. So it's not necessarily the research and the research that you're presenting that makes it set 2, it's what they are doing with the content. So we now have an idea of that for your agenda, you need to have the topic, the teaching strategy, and a brief description. But there are 5 components to your agenda. The first one is the reflection activity, like we just discussed. Again, it is really the time and space for you to allow the participants to bring in all of their prior experience and knowledge into the room with them. So it's not necessarily tied to your objective, but you will need to describe your teaching strategy and your description. The next item is your activities related to your objectives. Again, that's the same thing as that poster board walk or that research presentation with a brainstorm and a breakout group debrief. Your professional action plan activity, also like your reflection, is not necessarily tied to your objective. This is a best practice for adult education, very similar to the reflection, but this is time and space for you to allow your participants to take whatever it is that they gained from your training. It's not necessarily a targeted content item, but more of just what did they gain from your training and what are they going to implement once they leave it. So this could be anywhere from 1 minute to however long you want it to be. It could be just 1 word, it could be showing an item, or it could be writing something, an individual reflection of what it is that they're going to take with them when they leave. But again, you'll need to describe all that. In addition, your evaluation will need to have a teaching strategy and a brief description of how you're going to, and that needs to be anonymous. The point of an evaluation is also best practices for adult education, but it's for you as the trainer. It is time and space to allow your participants to say what went well and what didn't go so well and give you feedback so that you can take that, glean from that, and to adapt and change and better your own practice as a trainer. And lastly, your certificates also need a teaching strategy and brief description around how you will get those to your participants once they've completed, which again is just a little different than it is in person, because you would normally just hand out your certificates, but that's not possible with live online. So we've really taken a lot of this time and the tutorial to talk about the agenda, but as we looked at with the poster board activity, when we did that direct conversion and did that online, it's pretty complicated. And it will impact other things than your agenda. And if you can take a guess, it's likely going to impact the time that it takes. Not necessarily that activity, but other things that when you move them to live online or you're developing live online, and it may impact the objective, and you may need to change your objectives because your agenda starts to change and the way that you interact starts to change. At the very end of all of these changes, you may realize, oh, I'm going to want to change the title or description of this training. So when we are developing or converting a live or an in-person training to live online, there are definite impacts that happen across all of the training session standards. If there are, especially if you are converting in a certified session, you want to make sure you inform the trainer team, and we'll help guide you to make those changes. So thank you for joining me for this hopefully quick little tutorial. I hope that you found some of the information helpful, and that you, by listening to this, you can start to practice your own proposals for live online, and that you start to feel more comfortable, and that you don't receive any feedback and get an approved session. And we hope to provide more of these, so stay tuned for more. So thank you and take care.